Hey, everybody! Welcome to a new episode of the ST or the City SC show, I should say. My name is Brandon. This is Chris with me tonight. We're going to be talking about the Seattle Sounders game from last weekend. A look ahead to the U.S. Open Cup against Union Omaha, and then a little bit into the game against San Diego. And if you saw the thumbnail beforehand, I apologize. It should have said San Diego, not San Jose. Got a little ahead of myself. So we'll talk about all that here on tonight's show. Chris, how you doing, man?
Good. Thanks for having me. It's nice to get a chance to talk City with you as always, and looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to have you, jump on when you're able to and talk
Thanks.
with us, and whatnot. So, give me your first thoughts. So you look at Seattle. The Seattle game wasn't pretty. Started out decent. Wasn't pretty though at the end. What was your initial thoughts on the game?
Initially, yeah. I mean, even though they get that penalty kick, Hartel scores and they take a lead, which has not been something that they've done very much this year. Obviously, with all their issues in scoring,
Right.
It never felt like a game that they were going to win. Even up 1-0, like you just kind of were waiting and you're waiting for the other shoe to drop, and it was just one of those things where personally in watching it, I just felt like, yeah, this doesn't feel like a win. That's a hard place to play anyways. Lumen Field is notoriously difficult. They hadn't even scored there up until the Hartle, the Hartle goal. So in 4 previous games, they had never, 2 previous games up there, obviously, they had never scored there. It's a turf surface. It's not a bad turf surface like Vancouver has, which is awful, but it just felt like a game that they were not going to win. And that's the kind of game where you're like, okay, if you can get a point out of the road, on the road against Seattle, that's a pretty decent result. Obviously they haven't won in, 6 games or whatever the number is up to now, but
Yeah.
There you're thinking, okay, that's a winnable game, or not necessarily a winnable game rather. And so if it's a game where you can get a point and get out of there, that would have been nice. But again, it never felt like one they were going to win. And as soon as kind of the tide turned against them, they crumbled, which unfortunately has been kind of, all too often here this year. So,
Yeah. I know I was kind of watching going back and watch some of the highlights from it. There was a couple of, I think it was the first or second Sounders goal had a little deflection off the City defender. And then there was another, I think it was another one later on that just didn't seem, I don't know if the goal, if the goalie just didn't get a good read on it, or again, it might have been another deflection too.
Lund's positioning's been solid.
Yeah.
And it really, he's not at fault for any of the goals. From an outside perspective, the City was getting pulled out of position defensively too much.
Yeah.
And so, Seattle has some guys who are effective finishers, and that's something where if you're in a position to defend, that's obviously what their kind of calling card has been this year, which is their defense. But when they lose their structure, it kind of gets messy really fast. And so that was the bulk of the issues. Is Seattle's ball movement was pulling guys out of position, and it was creating shooting lanes for them. And there was 1 or 2 bad breaks with some bounces, but I mean, overall, you can look at the possession numbers, you can look at the style of play, you can, it doesn't take a genius to look at that game and go, yeah, City got dominated, and it's just, you cannot expect to defend for 70 or 80 minutes in a game and win. You just can't. Now they were missing obviously some midfield depth, and Morales was out because of his red card, and that was Lubin's first game back, obviously with the situation with his wife and her health. And so he wasn't able to start or really, do much in his limited time that he came on as a sub.
Sure.
But even some of the lineup and substitution things lead some questions. I openly questioned, on a team that has such trouble scoring, why you're leaving, if not the most creative offensive player you have, at least one of the top offensive players you have in Celio on the bench. And you wonder how much that's related to the giveaway he had the week before that led to the goal that cost him a win in Los Angeles, and you hope that Mellberg looks at that and says, okay, yeah, he made a bad play, but he's still a guy ultimately that we need on the field and helping create offensive chances for us, rather than I'm going to, put him in the punishment, the sin bin for making a mistake. And everybody makes mistakes, obviously. And so I'm hoping that he will get a start tomorrow. I'm really hopeful that he'll get a start in the U.S. Open Cup game that we're going to talk about tomorrow. And then he should be on the field, whether he starts or subs on Saturday. Like Celio is in a very important part of their offense. He's one of the few guys they have that can create on his own. And so he needs to be on the field. And when you're looking at what the lineup was like on, last weekend, and then you're looking at what the subs were, to not have him on the field was questionable at best.
Yeah. So, yeah, it seems to be the going trend this year. Is there's just a lot of questionable things that have kind of happened when it comes to like the substitutions late in games and whatnot. At least from tweets and posts and stuff that I've seen, seems to be a going thing that there's not a lot of.
So the part of the problem. Yeah. So part of the problem is that what we were promised from Lutz and Olaf before the season started, which was, in Lutz's words, Lutz von Steele, obviously our sporting director, City 2.0, which was an evolution of the pressing style that we were playing before.
Right.
And, and kind of what we were sold was that Olaf Mellberg, the new coach, is not a guy who is necessarily tied to any particular formation, tied to any particular style of play. He's pretty adaptable, right? Those are the things that we were told. And so far, we haven't seen that. We've only, we haven't seen the high pressing style, which a lot of us weren't super wild about anyways. I don't think that the Carnell super high press style works here over a long, hot summer, what we have in St. Louis. Yeah. It's something we've talked about before on previous shows. It's hard to play that style all year long, during the summer schedule. It just wears you down. But when you talk about like having a coach that supposedly isn't tied to any particular style, but then the only thing we're seeing is 3 center backs with 2 wing backs with, 2 or 3 mids and the 4, like we're seeing the same style, the same formation almost every game. Where's the adaptability? Like that's the thing is, it's not a secret that Mellberg is not happy with the talent that's on the roster. Like that's not, I don't think anybody's, fooled to think that he thinks that this is a good enough like composition of players. But it's a little surprising to me anyways, from the outside looking in, that they haven't tried to mix it up a little bit and do more. And yes, they've had injuries and they're still, having, guys who aren't available. Kessler's still out and some other, obviously there's injuries that need to get guys back and healthy. But it's kind of sticking with this same style, the same formation, this, uber defensive, philosophy that, and I said a few weeks ago, you can be defensive and win, and that's fine because you're winning. Or you can be super high flying offense, and even if you don't win, you're still fun to watch and you're exciting. But if you're boring and bad, that's the killer, right? That's the thing nobody wants to watch. That's the thing nobody wants to see. You start to lose, your casual fans when you're both boring and losing, right? And so, that's what we're hoping that they turn around, and maybe they can use tomorrow as a little bit of a momentum builder going into to San Diego. But the real problem is not the fact that they have San Diego coming in, who's a good quality team this year. Nobody really knew what to make of them being an expansion side, but they played very well. It's not about next Saturday. It's about the game after that, which is Kansas, Kansas
City.
And if Sporting comes in here and wins, that is panic time, and at that point you're going to have a fan base that's ready to revolt because, we lost out there and looked terrible. That's a club that's not good. They're not good, and they weren't good. And I called it when I was on with you. I said it's the worst loss in club history.
Yeah.
And if they come in here and win, you're going to have the pitchforks will be out for Melbourne, unfortunately. Yeah. So it's going to be, and that's something that, is going to be next week. But yeah, I mean, they better win tomorrow against the USL 1 side, which we'll talk about. And then they definitely better win next Wednesday. And I think realistically, like if they can get a point out of Saturday against San Diego, I think that would be good. But we'll see. So
yeah, I've kind of picked up on that the tension between the fans and what's going on in the organization a little bit. And I saw there was a post the other day that somebody was asking, like, okay, like Carnell got the axe because of the same kind of situation, just in a little bit different ways. It's like, how long is Melbourne going to be? How long of a leash is he going to have? Is it going to be shorter?
They've actually have a worse start this year than they did last year. Right. From a points perspective. Right. And so when you look at it and you say, okay, Carnell got fired, he was actually better than Melbourne's record to this point. Carnell also had a ton of injuries to deal with. Mm-hmm. But there was some underlying stuff with Carnell, relationships with players.
Right.
He had kind of lost the locker room. I don't think we're at that point with Melbourne. But if the losing continues and certain players don't get the playing time that they feel like they deserve, and they look at, it's one thing if you're not playing on a winning team, right? Mm-hmm. Because as a player, they all want to play, right? They all want to start, they all want to play, they all want to prove what they can do. But if you're a bench guy or a role player, you can accept that a lot easier on a winning team because you're like, well, yeah, I'm not getting to play, but obviously what the coach is doing is working, right? We're winning. That's, it comes with it, right? But if you're a bench guy on a losing team, then your thoughts of, well, why, if the guys that are out there instead of me aren't winning, why am I not getting the time I feel I deserve, right?
Right.
And when that stuff starts to happen and starts to snowball, that's when a locker room can turn sour. And, you're hoping that doesn't happen, but these guys are human, right? And so you're hoping that Melberg can right the ship quickly before he loses that group of players. And that's not obviously what you want is you want to keep a positive locker room. And so, it's going to be a test for him, obviously, with still guys out. And we just went through a really tough stretch. We're coming to the end of that kind of 6-game, set where it was LA and Seattle and, a bunch of teams that were going to be probably as good, if not better than them. Columbus, obviously, and Vancouver, and you can make up only so many points that you don't get early on. That was a thing you and I talked about a couple of weeks ago when I was on with you, is that if you start a season good, like they did 2 years ago, you can build up a buffer of points that allows you to go through slumps later on in the year. Mm-hmm. But when you don't, and you're behind the 8 ball, now not only are you just trying to catch up on points, but you're having to pass a bunch of other teams, right? And
right,
sometimes you just can't do that. You just can't. There's not enough time left, and so they need to turn this around quickly, and obviously, if they can get a win tomorrow, that would help momentum. And if they can get points out of San Diego, that'd be great. Obviously, you'd love to see a win, but we'll see. So
yeah, I know. Like mentioned, you talk about trying to climb the ladder, and it makes it even harder when you're losing to the teams that that are just above you.
You're chasing, yeah.
Then you add more. That separation becomes from here to here. It becomes larger, and it makes it harder, especially if those teams keep winning too.
Yeah, you turn all those games into 6-point swings,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why the LA FC game stings so much.
Right.
It's a game that you just have to see out, and you wind up getting 3 points instead of 2. And it's last year I kind of said that they had the unfortunate habit of turning ties into losses and wins into ties. Right. Whereas in the first year, it was the opposite. They would turn losses into ties, and they turn ties into wins. And then this year, it's again, it's just been an environment of uninspired soccer, followed by a lack of results, which is, something that, again, that combo is death for a club. So
Yeah, it doesn't work. Looking at the Seattle game, we'll finish this last question here.
yeah.
Was there anybody who, kind of any player that stuck out to you, either positively or negatively, in this game?
I mean, in the Seattle game, like, there wasn't anybody that I was like, wow, what a performance they
Yeah.
had. The one guy that we were interested to see is the guy they traded for from Atlanta FC,
Mhm.
Atlanta United, which is Ande Silva.
Yeah.
And I had tweeted out something, or X, however you want to call it, put something on social media. We'll just say that.
Yeah.
That 2 minutes into his shift, you could tell that Ande Silva is, without a doubt, the fastest guy on the club. Like, it's not even close. Like, he is so much faster than everybody else they have. And I said, but the problem is, I don't know if that means he's just super fast or everybody else we have is super slow.
Right.
And Taylor Twellman, the MLS guy who I banter back and forth with on Twitter sometimes, was like, oh, no, it's that they're slow. Like, Ande Silva is fast, right?
Yeah.
But he's not Usain Bolt, right? He's not a guy that is like the fastest guy in the league. He's a fast player.
Mhm.
But City just has no foot speed at all, right? And that is part of what is killing them from a transition game, because if you are defending a lot and you're relying on the counterattack, which means you're going to steal the ball or get a turnover or make a play, and now all of a sudden you need to turn and go quickly up the field to beat, their defensive line,
Mhm.
you need speed to do that.
Right.
And they don't have it. And what's happening is by the time they're able to work the ball up the field with their lack of speed, the other team has set up defensively, right?
Yeah.
And when you give a team a time, it doesn't matter what level you're playing at. It could be high school, it could be college, it could be semi-pro, pro, it doesn't matter. When you give a team time to set up defensively, just like in basketball, right?
Mhm.
That's why fast break, you're getting a higher percentage of chances to score
Right.
than you do when you walk the ball up the court and you let a team set up defensively. You're not taking advantage of space and you're not causing confusion. Well, it's what happened against Seattle is the rare opportunity that City had to possess the ball. They weren't connecting passes. Obviously, having guys out in the midfield hurts, because especially with lack of Morales, and so they really had no midfield presence at all in order to transition the ball from defense to offense,
Mhm.
which then means that you're just walking the ball up the field essentially slowly, giving Seattle time to set up, giving Seattle time to position where they want.
Sure.
And when you're going against one of the two best coaches in the league, which you can flip a coin, you can say that Wilfred Nancy from Columbus is the best coach in the league, or the other side of that coin is Brian Schmetzer in Seattle. Like, they're the two best coaches in the league. If you give Brian Schmetzer a time to plan and pick you apart both offensively and then structure defensively, you're not going to beat one of his teams. Like, you're just not. And so City's lack of speed was even more evident once we saw Silva on, right? And so Silva didn't do much, and it's not like he had a great game, but at least that was something interesting to see in an otherwise uninteresting, uninspired game.
Mhm. Yeah, it seemed like the beginning of the game there was a little bit of momentum. You get the penalty shot early on,
Mhm.
to go up 1-0, rather quickly. But then to turn around and, kind of give
You
up the
give it
same
right
thing.
back.
Yeah,
You
you
give
give
him
it
a PK right back.
right.
And all that momentum just goes out the
Yeah, it's
window.
gone.
And the other thing too is this team has not shown the fortitude that when they get down, they're able to come back.
Mhm.
And that was a problem with some of the Carnell teams last year, and even towards the end of the first season with Carnell clubs, was
Right.
the minute they had adversity, they cracked, right?
Yep.
Like, they just didn't fight back. They didn't show that kind of resilience that you want to see. And you don't know if that's a leadership from the coaching issue or leadership from the player issue.
Mhm.
Obviously the guy we haven't talked about who's still out and hopefully will be back this weekend is Roman Verke, who's their
Yeah,
captain, right? He's been
right.
out now with his hand injury, which is kind of a testament to Ben Lunt and how well Lunt's played, right? And he's been fine, which is all you want from a backup, just like with a backup quarterback coming in. If they're fine, if they don't hurt you, you're not expecting Ben Lunt to come in and steal you games, right?
Yeah.
You're not, you don't expect a quarterback to come in and, off the bench and throw for 400 yards.
No, you just
don't lose the game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just don't mess up. Right.
Yeah.
And so Lunt's been fine with his opportunity to play, but you don't know if Hartle, who's kind of taken over the captain role while Berkey's been out, is a vocal, rah-rah guy. You don't know if he's a chew your ass kind of guy or if he's just quiet. And so that's the thing is I don't know, especially when you have Leuven out and you have Berkey out, where's the leadership from the player side? Kessler, I think, is a guy who can be that, but I don't think he's been here long enough. He's a younger guy. And he's hurt too, right? So he's not on the field, right? And so when you look at it, you're like, okay, yeah, everybody in town is pointing fingers and saying, it's Melberg's fault, it's Lutz's fault,
right?
And you have some people saying, obviously you have your, guys who had Klaus, and you have people who don't like certain players, whatever. But the question I don't hear asked enough is, where's the leadership on the team from a player perspective?
Yeah.
Where's the guys who are gonna get in somebody else's face, and Berkey does that, right? But when he's not there, I don't see that they have somebody right now that's doing that and inspiring their club from within.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, it doesn't help you in any way when you
you and I both played sports, in our youth, right? And some teams I played on had guys who were, and I took leadership roles in some of the team, especially baseball teams I played on. And sometimes you have guys that are just lead by example, quiet dudes. And then occasionally you have the rah-rah, in your face, let's treat every game like it's the, World Series kind of guy. But if you just have a bunch of guys that are just kind of neutral, I just need to see something. I need to see some fight out of somebody. So,
yeah. Right. Yeah. And that makes sense. It does. And you look at a team like that right now, it makes sense why they could be, why that might be part of the issue right now.
Yeah.
Could be.
I think it is.
Yeah. Jump over to the and I not necessarily keys to the game for this one, but let's talk about the game against Union Omaha. Now, this isn't necessarily a game for. I mean, how serious do you think City is going to take this game? Do you think obviously it's still an important
thing.
They
better take it very seriously.
Okay.
Yeah, they better take it super serious, and for anybody who is kind of new to soccer and doesn't quite understand, why are they playing this random team from Omaha, Nebraska? So the U.S. Open Cup is our country's national tournament. It is the equivalent of the U.S. Open in tennis or the U.S. Open in golf, in that anybody can qualify for it. Okay.
Right.
And I could do an entire show on nothing but the U.S. Open Cup, and so I won't subject you to that. But for anybody who is not familiar with it, basically, the way that it works is that there are lower level qualifying rounds of this tournament, and then once you get to a certain point, you have the MLS clubs that come in that are playing in it. Now, the MLS is actively trying to destroy the Open Cup, which is a conversation for another day. And unfortunately, that the MLS doesn't control the U.S. Open Cup. They don't make money off of it, so they've really tried to limit the amount of teams that are playing in it. Obviously, City didn't get to play in it last year, which led to supporter group boycotts and all kinds of controversy that we talked about last year, and some stuff that went on. And this year, City is being permitted to play in the tournament. Some MLS clubs this year got to play their their MLS Next Pro team, instead of the primary team, but City is playing in the their full squad in the Open Cup. So the Open Cup is super important to St. Louis. And we have 10 Open Cup winners that have come from St. Louis. It's a history in that tournament that is entwined with the city of St. Louis and soccer in our city, right? And some of the greatest, in fact, pretty much all of the greatest soccer players ever from St. Louis have played men on the men's side, obviously, and we've had some amazing women's players, but men's players have played in the U.S. Open Cup and were part of winning teams in the U.S. Open Cup. And so
Right.
it's something that, it will be a different environment tomorrow night. The attendance is not going to be great. We've already kind of been told indicators that to expect not good attendance. It's a Wednesday night. The weather is going to be maybe okay, but I saw maybe there's going to be rain. I'm not 100% sure.
I've
What
seen
the weather is supposed to be like.
in between 7 to 10. I don't know if it's like storm or if it's just
Yeah.
going to be rain or if it's going to be your
Actual
typical
storms,
springtime severe storm type of deals.
Yeah. So I think it's going to be not a good look as far as the attendance, but it's going to be somewhat understandable. The thing that is a little frustrating to me sometimes is, and you see a lot of this online, so how much of it you should care about, I don't know, but
Right.
Is people who are openly rooting against the Open Cup or are actively like trashing it. It doesn't make sense. Yes, I understand that City does not benefit financially from it,
Right.
but that's not what this tournament is about, right? The U.S. Open Cup, we don't have promotion and relegation in the United States in the way that England does or some of the European leagues do, right?
Right. Yeah,
Where a lower level club, like a Wrexham, for example, can get promoted, multiple times over 3 years. We don't have that in this country, right? And so this is the opportunity for lower level clubs to get their chance to play against bigger clubs. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
This is it. This is their one chance to play their way into this tournament through enough rounds and to get their shot at beating one of the big boys of one of the big MLS clubs. And so there's nothing wrong with being a St. Louis City soccer fan, right?
Yep.
A St. Louis City fan, where you're a fan of City and you follow them now that we have an MLS team, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in my opinion, and I don't like to gatekeep soccer. I think that's been a problem for many, many years. It's getting better, but I think it's been a problem for many years of gatekeeping soccer that, you don't appreciate it or whatever. But
right.
You can be a City fan, but I don't think you can call yourself a St. Louis soccer fan without at least acknowledging and appreciating the history of the U.S. Open Cup and what St. Louis has meant to it and what it has meant to St. Louis. And for anybody who just wants to say, oh, it's unimportant, we don't make any money off of it, you're playing against these low-level clubs that nobody knows who they are. The fans in Omaha know who it is, right? This is their chance. And yes, we played them a couple of years ago. Omaha traveled great. They were here. They were super nice people that came in and saw our brand new stadium, and they got to see, oh, this is what, MLS experience is like. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing that, I just want people to appreciate the fact that this tournament is not necessarily about the dollars. Obviously Leagues Cup, which is the tournament that MLS wants to push because they own it. And they participate in that along with League MX from Mexico. Right. They want to push that, which is why they don't have much interest in promoting US Open Cup, but the US Open Cup matters. And, there's a reason I have that scarf right over over my shoulder that says Open Cup. On the other side of it says, it matters. So there's a reason why those of us who are into the history of it and what it means to the city and what it means to our soccer heritage, take it very seriously and do get a little defensive when people are like, oh, well, we don't make any money off of it. Why do we care? We don't care about playing these low level clubs. That's not what it's about, right? It's about soccer in this country as a whole, not just your one team that you root for. Right. Yeah. And it's no different than, if you are a soccer fan in St. Louis, or as I like to call it, a St. Louis soccer fan, that means you appreciate more than just City. You appreciate the high school scene that we have, which is one of the best in the country. You have college that's, we've so many great college programs, and SLU's won 10, 11 national championships, and SIUE's won a national championship. Like at all different levels, we have college, we have semi-pro, we have indoor. That's what it takes is appreciation as a St. Louis soccer fan. If you want to be a City fan and just care about City, that's fine. More the merrier. And it, obviously we want all those people to come in, but I think that, what I try to do too, just, myself, is to encourage people to know more about soccer in this town other than just City itself. Right.
Yeah.
So that's my TED talk. Thank you for coming. But anyways, when talking about Omaha, this is a club that's won the USL 1 level. which is, so for those of you who aren't familiar, there's MLS, obviously.
Mhm.
And then the next kind of tier of soccer in this country is the USL. And the USL has multiple tiers, just like, England does with their pyramid.
Right.
And so there's USL Championship, and then there's USL 1, which is the next level down. Okay. So they are basically the third tier of American soccer. They are the defending champions. They won it last year. They do have a former City player in Max Schneider, who was a guy that played a little bit for City 2 years ago and was on City 2 for the most part. So Omaha is a very good level, or good quality lower level club. They will be coming in here to prove a point. They will be coming in here, I'm sure, with some memories of what we did to them a couple years ago, which was a 5-1 victory.
Yeah.
And so, when you have a team like City who has struggled to score and struggled to win, and you're taking on a team that has nothing to lose, right?
Right.
They're not expected to win. This is a classic trap game for City. Like, which is why, I've been banging the drum now for weeks. Like, they need to take this seriously. They stated at the beginning of the year that the U.S. Open Cup, the fact that they were getting to play in it again, and that they understood what it means to those of us who care about it, the fan base, they said they were going to take it serious, right?
Yeah.
And so tomorrow night's lineup will say a lot to me about how seriously they are taking it, because if it's all rotation and, like you're seeing guys come up from City 2 to play,
Mhm.
that's not a great sign, right? But if you're seeing, okay, yeah, some of these guys that are nursing injuries, we're not going to play them, but you're going to see most of our, let's say more than half of our regular starters,
Yeah.
then that's a good sign to me that, okay, yeah, they're actually trying to win and advance in this tournament. Because, again, right now they're sitting outside the MLS playoffs. And so this is the only outside tournament they're getting to play in this year. They're not in Leagues Cup. They weren't in the CONCACAF Champions League. This is it. This is our only other competition that they have other than MLS this year. So why not make the most of it?
Yeah, you kind of jumped, or not jumped, but brought up one of the questions. Where did it go? I had it here. Where did it go? I had it. Where did it go? Oh yeah, never mind. It's right here. It's right here. With their struggles, offensively and stuff as of late, is this a game that you could see Omaha like kind of exposing more of what's wrong with City?
You hope not. You hope that City rolls out a lineup that is just so far superior in quality that those guys just are better players, right? They should be better players. Nothing against Union Omaha,
right?
But there's a reason that their players are in USL 1 and not USL Championship or MLS, right? These are guys that are not, are not the quality level that City has. And so you would hope that just based on talent alone, City would win. But what I'm hoping that it does is lets these guys just play a little more relaxed, maybe, and say, okay, let's go for it a little bit more, because this is a team where we're maybe not as terrified of getting scored on by. City's tactical, formations and strategies have been so mystifying this year that it's just, it's hard to describe what's going on. And so you're confused, as to how they would approach this from a tactical perspective. If he rolls out and they start playing the same conservative defensive style against a USL 1 team, you're going to hear some screams and yells from the crowd, right? You're going to hear some very unhappy people, because if you're that set in your ways for a coach that, again, we were told is not set in his ways, but to me tomorrow, if they roll out with a 4-3-3, that would be okay. That would be a formation that I could see them playing with the guys that they have. Why not let Xande Silva play, let Celio play, get some other guys involved, let Makai Joyner play, still play 4 in the back, play solid defensively. But if they roll out again with 3 and 2 wing backs, and they're going ultra conservative again against the USL 1 team, that's a warning sign.
Yeah. It seems
And
like
what that means, honestly, is that he doesn't trust his players.
Yeah.
Like that's the ultimate sign. If he rolls out with that formation and that tactical kind of structure,
Right.
that shows me he has absolutely no faith in this club.
So. Yeah, which isn't necessarily a good thing, because you looking to with games like this, because it does have that bit of importance in it. At least, like you said, it should. But you can also build confidence and momentum off a game like this too.
I mean, it's similar. It's in some ways it's similar to, and you see this sometimes in college football, where you'll have a really good college team, and they'll obviously play their preseason schedule, and then they'll get into conference play, and about 2/3 of the way through the year, they play unknown state A&T, or it's like some team you've never heard of, right?
Right.
And it's almost like they're giving themselves a reset to then finish up the rest of the season, right?
Yep.
And they know they're not going to lose that game, right? And it's a way to get healthy. It's a way to kind of get some guys some time.
Yeah.
And this, yes, you would have loved to have City kind of firing all cylinders and maybe sitting, higher up in the top part of the table, and now this is your week to kind of take it easy and get some guys involved. But again, I think they need to treat this as almost as a league game, like from a lineup perspective. They need to take this seriously. They need to win this game. And I would say that, of the next 3 games they have, which is the Open Cup game tomorrow night, San Diego, and Sporting, that's 2 out of 3 of those they got to win, right? Yeah. And the middle one, points would be great. A win would be amazing, but there is absolutely no excuse to lose to a USL 1 team at home. And they better win the rivalry match next week, right? So like those 3 games are super important. But the Omaha game, again, and Omaha is a good quality USL 1 team, but they're not having to travel there. The opportunity is for some MLS clubs to travel to these places. And in fact, the Louisville Minnesota game, if Louisville had were to win that, City would go there, and which for longtime soccer fans going all the way back to the St. Louis FC days, that was one of the best rivalries and maybe the biggest rivalry that St. Louis FC had, which was Louisville. And so that would be a kind of a very fun nostalgia trip for a lot of soccer fans here we get to go to Louisville, a trip that people used to make for the St. Louis FC days. And they have a nice, brand new stadium that our friend Tom Franklin went down to see a game down there, this year. And Ethan from St. Louis City Boys is from Louisville. So, there's a connection there with some podcasters and stuff in the area. Yeah. And so that would be cool. Right. But obviously you got to get there and they would have to get there. But, again, City needs to not screw around tomorrow, to take it seriously, get a nice, easy, maybe 2 or 3 or 4-0 win. And that would maybe have some momentum that would carry into the weekend.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that would be, I think more important is just to get some momentum behind them, get that little bit of confidence. I think that's what they need. And, as much as some people probably aren't looking forward to this matchup, thinking it's probably just like you've mentioned, it's more of a waste of time than it is anything. Think of it the other side of things as, maybe this is the game that they need. Maybe this is the type of a little bit of competitive side, little, competitive game that gets them back, gives them that little bit of edge again to come into the game against San Diego on Saturday, or is it Saturday?
Yeah, it's Saturday.
And hopefully get a win there. That's what you hope for, at least.
Yeah, well, so yeah, I mean, you're expecting win tomorrow night. Yeah. You would hope for a win on Saturday. I'd be happy with points, right, of any kind, right? So if they get a point on Saturday, I think that'd be fine, right? Right. We could talk about San Diego in a little bit, but yeah, the Omaha game, that has to be a win tomorrow. Like, there's no excuse for them to lose that game. There's no reason they should lose that game. And City fans will expect a win. And so especially those of us who are going, who do take this tournament seriously and who are, invested in it and who watch it even when City's not involved in it. We are expecting them to put their best foot forward, and that's all you can ask for.
Right. So. Yeah. Still looking for tickets for tomorrow night's game. There's still quite a few available.
There will be. Yeah. And City has.
You can watch.
City has kind of shot themselves in the foot a little bit with the pricing, which I also think is going to contribute to a not good crowd. I mean, I'm expecting maybe 5,000, which that's going to be a pretty empty stadium tomorrow. Mm-hmm. It will be, and so I've already kind of resigned myself that, people are not going to come out against Union Omaha. Now, let's say they win the next one, and then Minnesota were to win, or, obviously they would be on the road, I think still, but, or there's a chance they'd be on the road still, but if they play another home game, it's probably going to be against an MLS side. And at that point, you're further on the tournament, and you would hope that people would be like, oh yeah, we're in the semis or we're in the quarters, okay, at that point, I get it.
Yeah.
But playing a team that we've already seen, that was the thing that was a little disappointing. It was like we could have played some other clubs and had the potential to play some other clubs that we haven't seen. And that would have been pretty cool, or to even travel would have been pretty cool. But, again, I get it. It's a little bit of, we've already seen this. It's a tournament a lot of people just don't have interest in, or don't understand why we should be interested in. That's why we preach the gospel of it. But yeah, you're hoping that City wins, and again, yes, there's plenty of seats available. They're not even opening upstairs. It's all going to be downstairs. We'll be open. It's GA seating, so you sit where you want. So, it's still fun. It's still a good time to go and watch. But yeah, I'm hoping that the weather stays nice, and so that doesn't dissuade more people from not going. So
right, yeah. So if you still looking to go, still got time. The game's also on Paramount Plus tomorrow night instead of Apple TV. So that's also a positive on that side of things. If they win, they'll move on. As we've mentioned, they'll either play Minnesota United or they will play Louisville City. Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Next in the next round of the US. U.S. Open Cup. Talking, we brought up San Diego a couple times here. Look ahead to it. Obviously, it's a little while away still. A couple days. You don't know what kind of what kind of injuries could occur in tomorrow night's game, and whatnot. Last time these two teams played, it was 0-0. It was a 0-0 draw. San Diego just won their first game in about a month. From the looks of from what I've seen, they just beat Dallas 5-0. What would you expect going into this one against San Diego? Say, they're a healthy squad.
So yeah, I mean, it's hard to know what you can take from the first match. The first match was obviously San Diego's inaugural home match. So you had all that kind of atmosphere and pomp and circumstance and all that stuff that goes along with it. City got a major break in that game, and about 15 minutes in, Chucky Lozano from Mexico, who is their big, international signing this year, and kind of their talisman, got injured, pulled his hamstring. So we didn't have to deal with defending him all game, which is nice. He is now healthy. Anders Dyer is another guy that they brought in who's been, very, very solid for them.
Right.
So yeah, they've had a little bit of a slump, but we just got done talking about how Union Omaha can be a confidence booster for City. Well, San Diego's coming off a pretty big confidence booster when you just annihilate, Dallas is not very good.
Right.
But Dallas was just coming off a win against Inter Miami, and so you look at it and you say, okay, well, yeah, Dallas is not all that great, but they just beat Messi and one of the best teams in the league, and so it has to be a confidence builder, and just for guys to get on the scoreboard as a confidence builder. Soccer is a lot like, especially for offensive players, it's a lot like baseball in that, guys go through streaks, and, once you get hot, the ball looks gigantic. And if you're hot in soccer, the goal looks, 50 feet wide. Right. And and when you get cold, the ball looks tiny. It looks like a golf ball, and the goal looks tiny. It looks like a hockey goal, right? So it's all about that kind of mental, where you are mentally as much as where you are physically. And San Diego is coming off an impressive win. They play a very positive style. They play a possession-based style that's kind of interesting. They have an interesting mix of kind of older and younger guys. They did a very good job in constructing that roster, but they also have a lot of money. They have a significant amount of money behind that club, and so you would expect them to go out and get guys of that quality and of that level, right? I think people were just a little like, and they were the same way with City, which is, how are these guys going to actually play together?
Yeah.
It's a brand new team. How are they going to mesh together? How are these players going to kind of integrate? And they started off hot. They had a little bit of a stretch where they didn't play as well.
Yeah.
But now you come off that big win against Dallas, and you're like, okay, they're going to come here for the first time. Talent-wise, they're every bit as good as City is. They're dangerous on the counter.
Mm-hmm.
Their speed can be a problem, especially if Lozano's, on all cylinders, and Anders Dyer's playing all well. So all those guys are very much, people who can hurt you.
Sure.
And so this is not going to be a game that City can get a point out of, in my opinion, if they don't score.
Yeah.
So, I thought, and I think we talked about it one of the last times I was on with you, is when they went to San Diego,
mm-hmm.
I thought they played the perfect style. Now, we didn't really know. That was the second game of the year. We didn't really know that they were going to be this boring all year,
right,
and play all this defensive all year.
Right.
But
yeah.
I thought that it was, at the time, I was like, hey, they did the exact right thing in that scenario, which is, you're going to have all this crowd going nuts. It's their opening game. You're going to have all this energy in the stadium. Why
Mm-hmm.
not take all the life out of it? Why not play dull, boring soccer, kill the crowd, make the game dirty and ugly and slow? Like, I thought, at the time, I was like, oh, this is genius from Melbourne. Now, little did we know that that's kind of all they've done this year.
Right.
But, I was thinking, like, that's perfect for this scenario, right?
Yeah.
Don't run up and down the field with them, right? Don't, and that's, again, we talked about it, when the last time I was on. That's the mistake that Charlotte made in the first game against us here in our home opener, is they they fed the crowd with their energy and their flopping, and they were trying to run up and down the field, and we were going up and down the field on them. And the crowd just kept getting more and more and more into it. And the energy,
mm-hmm.
And it was just insane. It was nuts. It was amazing game to watch, but they fed into it. And ultimately City wound up winning. And so I thought, oh yeah, City's going out there. They're dulling the game down. They're playing super defensive, very conservative, letting San Diego just run into this wall of defenders. And, by the time the game was over, the crowd was dead silent and bored. And so, yeah, I thought it was a great tactic at the time. Now, having seen this for another 10 games or 9 games, you realize that, oh, okay, it's not that they were choosing to do this. Maybe that's all they have, is just this ability to just play defense and not much else. And so I think San Diego is not going to be fooled by this. I don't think they're going to come in here and repeat the same mistakes as before, which means that I would expect them to at least get a goal, which means if City wants to get a point, they're going to have to score. And so, the problem is when you're trying to defend for 70, 80, 90% of the game,
mm-hmm.
and you're not giving yourself very many chances to possess the ball, move the ball upfield, or score. What it means is that in the rare opportunities that you do have those chances, you have to take advantage of them. Right.
Yeah.
If you're only getting 3 good scoring opportunities in a game and you don't score in one of those 3, you have nothing else. Right. If you have a lot of volume of shots and a lot of activity, chances are one of those is going to go in. Right. If you get a lot of shots, statistics dictate that you're going to have a higher chance to score. And so you're not putting as much pressure on yourself. And so the other thing, and I've mentioned this many times in the past, especially with, the way we talked about last year, was if you're not posing any threat at all offensively, then what that means is that if teams have no fear of you turning the ball upfield, like we talked about against Seattle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Seattle showed no concern at all about City on breakaways or, long passes or anything that would break their defense.
Right.
So what that means is these teams can continue to condense the field on you, and they keep pushing you back and pushing you back.
Yeah, you're playing half field at that point.
Yeah, and now you're playing your entire game in front of your goal,
right?
Defending, right? You're not stretching the field. You're not putting them out of position. And they can continue to ratchet up the pressure. They can continue to put you in positions where you're stuck defending. And all you're doing is just kicking the ball out to clear it. And now here they come again, right?
Yeah.
And so what it does is when they don't fear you offensively, and this is what happened last year when City had all those injuries offensively on offense and just had no offensive presence at all. And people just didn't fear that we were going to be able to turn the ball upfield and score on them.
Sure.
So they continued to just press a little bit higher and a little bit higher and a little bit higher, and their back line kept pushing up. And it's like a vice. And eventually, when you squeeze something hard enough, it's going to break. It's going to pop, right? And so City cannot play that style and against San Diego and expect to just walk out of here with a 0-0 tie. I don't think it's realistic. I think San Diego's offensively better than that. And I think San Diego would find a way to score. And that means if they're going to score once, then you got to at least score once. Right. And so they need to say, hey, we might give up a goal, but maybe the style we need to play will allow us to score 2.
Right. Yeah. And that's all you need.
Yeah.
And along, I was kind of looking at more of the things, stats and stuff from Seattle. And you brought up the fact that, you get shot attempts. Seattle had 29 shot attempts to City 7. And, the score reflects that.
Yep.
And 4-1. And you're getting a team, who's coming off of a big win, even though, say Dallas isn't that great of a team. It's still a 5-0 win. That's a big That's a big boost in your confidence coming off a win like that. Like, oh, hey, like we, everything that we were doing the other night was going in. No matter what we did, what we didn't do right, what we didn't do, what we did wrong, everything was going in.
Yeah.
And you get a team like City who is struggling. You come in with that same kind of confidence, like, hey, like just put stuff on net and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
But
it certainly allows you to play a lot more freely.
Yeah.
And if you're not putting all that pressure on yourself, and the classic example of that, has been obviously Klaus. Like Klaus for the past year looks like a guy who's pressing and is so desperate to try to make an impact, is so desperate to try and score, and you feel bad for him, because he's had opportunities and, for whatever reason, it just hasn't worked. But you can see the pressure and what I think fans want to see is players put in a position to succeed. And I think right now, the style that they're playing or that they're choosing to play is so defensive and is so, counter of what we saw for the first season that your casual fan is saying, well, why are we playing like this when the first year we won all those games and, we were running up and down the field all over the place and pressing and doing all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I think, the issue they have right now is just if number one concern for Mel Berg and the coaching staff is don't give up goals. That's fine if you have enough offensive talent that can create for themselves to get you goals, even though you're playing a defensive style.
Yeah.
But this is also MLS, right? This isn't Premier League. This isn't the Champions League. This isn't, Bundesliga. This is MLS.
Yeah.
Most of these guys are not good enough to do that. Like, it's just the reality. This is not the best league in the world. These are not the best players in the world. All of these guys have a reason why they're in MLS and not over in Europe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you have a coach who is a Premier League legend, played for Aston Villa, like he was a guy that played at the highest level. And I think he is struggling to understand or to realize that the guys he has are not at that level.
Right.
They're not. We don't have anybody on City who is as good of a player as Mel Berg was. Right? He was a better player in his time than anybody we have on the roster. And so sometimes when you get coaches that were really, really, really good players, they don't necessarily make the greatest coaches, because they expect guys to do things that only they could do, right?
Yeah.
That, it's kind of the classic thing with, that Patrick Waugh has struggled with as a hockey coach.
Yeah.
One of the greatest goalies ever has struggled sometimes with his coaching ability, which is he expects his goaltenders to be as good as he was. Well, nobody was. Like, he's one of
No.
the 5 greatest goalies ever. Like,
Yeah. And
it's
nobody
the
will
same.
be.
Yeah, it's the same as having, a really good quarterback as a coach,
Mhm.
right? Or a really good basketball player become a coach.
Right.
Michael Jordan would have been the absolute worst head coach in the history of the NBA, because he would have expected everybody to work as hard as he did, to be as good as he was, to, do all. He's a terrible executive / owner, but he would have been even worse as a coach, right? And so I think Melberg needs to understand, like, hey, these guys are maybe not capable of doing what you're asking them to do.
Mhm.
Find a different style that fits your players.
Right.
So,
yeah, that makes sense. I mean, funny, you kind of bring that up is I saw a video of Ovechkin's goal against at the time that the Phoenix Coyotes, and Wayne Gretzky was the head coach of the Coyotes at that time, and then you brought that up, and that was the first thing that came to my mind was they really weren't that good of a hockey team, even though they had the great one as their head coach at the time. I mean, that makes sense. And you're trying to fit something that doesn't work. It's like putting a star, the little blocks that you put in.
yeah,
You're
square
trying to
peg
put
into a round hole kind of thing.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
And that's the thing too, is you would hope that, again, and this circles back to what we talked about right off the bat, which was, we were told that this is a coach that's not tied to a particular formation, not tied to a particular style of play. And he has said in press conferences this year, oh, well, this is the style that fits our, what our roster is like at the moment.
Right.
Well, that's nice. Okay. And you can say that, but obviously the results haven't been there. And so, there needs to be a change in the positioning. Like, one of the biggest tactical issues that they have is that Hartle, who is probably one of their, if not best offensive players, is playing way too deep. Right.
Mhm.
And he's playing too much defense. He needs to be in the middle where he can create, where he can distribute, where he can get the ball to Toichert, where he can get it to Klaus, where he can get it to Celio. If Celio's playing, he needs to be distributing. And instead, he's having to drop too deep, or they're asking him to drop too deep. And it's just, it's like, if you have your back line set. Now, again, they've been struggling with injuries, right?
Mhm.
But if you have a back 5 of Connor Valum on the left, Thomas Todd when he comes back from injury on the right, 2 very good wing backs, okay? And then you have a center 3 of Kessler, who was basically their MVP so far this season, once he comes back from injury. And then Giannis Horn has been very good in the left center back position. And then on the right center back, you're either going to have Nielsen or you're going to have Timo Baumgartel. If that's your back 5, then you need to trust them and play a style with the rest of your players that allows them to have a little bit more freedom, right?
Sure.
And don't necessarily drop everybody so deep. Trust your positioning, trust your players.
Right.
And now there are guys that are starting for this team because of injuries or because of coach preference that should not be starting. And I would hope that those guys are not starting as soon as everybody's back healthy.
Yeah.
We have too many guys who are not MLS level starters playing starter minutes right now. And that obviously is an issue. And there's guys, and I'm not going to name people by name, but anybody who follows me on any social media knows who I'm talking about. There are 3 of them, especially, that, they are nice players. They are very nice individual people, but they're not starters in the MLS. And so those guys need to kind of get back to what they should be doing, which is being backups. And so hopefully we get healthy. Hopefully we can avoid some of these injuries and these leg injuries, especially, that have knocked guys out for extended periods of time. And especially as we get into warmer weather, you worry about that a little bit. But I mean, I think that from a roster perspective, they need to get healthy, and then they need to trust the players that they have. And if they need to adapt, then say, hey, we have to adapt the style.
Right. Yeah. Well, that too, you have, if you throw in the Seattle game, you have 6 games within 14 days or 15 days, something on that order.
Yeah, it's some number like that. Yeah,
it's a rough stretch. I mean, you got the
it's
Seattle
roster,
Union. It's a lot.
The schedule congestion. That MLS always scares. It's the old wives' tale. Oh well, too much roster, or schedule congestion, and okay, well, don't schedule Leagues Cup and US Open Cup together.
Yeah.
You're the ones that created it by having Leagues Cup. So,
Yeah.
but that's a whole nother, a discussion for another day. But
Right.
it's a rough stretch. They're coming off a long stretch of playing against a lot of good teams.
Yeah.
They haven't gotten points. And again, they really need to get some momentum based off tomorrow night, like you said. Have a nice, fairly easy win, build some confidence, get some goals, create some excitement, play well Saturday, hopefully. And now everything changes, obviously, if they win tomorrow and then they win against San Diego and then they win against Kansas. Now, all of a sudden, I think you've got a little bit of momentum.
Yeah.
And that could carry you into that next stretch of games, which they have, Minnesota, I think, is after that. And so they have some decent opponents coming up after that.
Colorado, San Jose.
Yeah, I think it's Minnesota, Colorado. Yeah. And so if you can get 2 wins, not counting obviously the Omaha game tomorrow, but 2 MLS wins, then all of a sudden, now you'd have a lot more momentum. You'd have a little bit more of a positive attitude around the club. I think the fan base would be a little more like, oh, okay, yeah, we beat Kansas. We beat a good San Diego team. So that's how kind of on an edge it is right now.
Right.
Like, it could either go real bad over the next 3 games, real bad.
Sure.
Or it could go okay, which would be me 2 wins and a loss or 2 wins and a draw. Or it could go phenomenal, which would be you win all 3, and that would be, kind of a massive turnaround for them. And it could really lead to more good performances. And so, this is going to be a very interesting stretch of 8 days, right? 3 games the next 8 days. And you could be looking at this next Thursday and going, okay, this is a disaster, or hey, this is really looking up.
Right.
Who knows? Yeah. The next 8 days will tell. So.
Yeah, and then you get a nice little. I mean, you could go from 10 points. Say you get a win against San Diego. Say you get a win against Sporting. Go from 10 points to 16. Within a week.
Yeah,
that's a big jump.
For sure.
When a lot of teams aren't playing.
Yeah, and and to have the opportunity. You're talking about playing a San Diego team that's still top 4 in the West.
Yep.
Sporting, I think, is 1 spot above them right now, so they're all kind of glumped together at the bottom. If you're able to jump into mid-table, all of a sudden you feel a lot better about where you are than if after 2 more games, and now you'd be at 12 games played, I think, or no, you'd be at 13 games played.
13, yeah.
Yeah, you'd be at 13 games played, which is, a little more than a third of the season. Mm-hmm. And if you're still sitting at, 13th, 14th in the West, you're not giving yourself an opportunity to compete for a playoff spot, much less have a decent spot in the table. So,
right.
It's a stretch of 3 games. One of them isn't even an MLS game, but still will matter to the overall psyche of this club.
Yes. Yeah.
And the psyche of the fan base. Right. And let's not delude ourselves. Right. This is a city right now coming off of a awful playoff loss.
Yeah.
That needs that's watching a lot of mediocre Cardinal baseball and has watched a lot of mediocre soccer so far this year. Yeah. The city of St. Louis in this area and this fan base could use something to get excited about, because if they start to go even further downhill and you don't have a good Cardinals team and hockey's now over, the grumpiness level will get to a maximum really quickly.
Right. At least we got the Battle Hawks.
Be good for anybody. Yeah, you still have the Battle Hawks. No disrespect to them.
So. Cardinals did pick up another win tonight. It's a 4th straight longest win streak of the season. They picked up a 2-1 win over Pittsburgh. Put them at 18-19 on the season now. So
they're shockingly entertaining for not being very good.
Yes.
And it's when you let the kids play, you're at least going to have interesting, games.
Our last Cardinals show, Josh brought that up. He's like, they might not be the best team, but they're fun to watch.
And again, we've talked about that in relation to City multiple times, which is you can be average or not great, but if you're fun to watch, it makes up for it, right?
Yep.
And so City right now obviously is sitting at 10 points, okay? Mm-hmm. But if they even had maybe 2 or 3 more points, but a couple of those were like up and down the field wins and
Yeah.
exciting soccer, and then oh man, we almost lost, we almost won that game, but we lost, but it was 5-4. Like you'd have a whole different perspective on this club.
Mm-hmm.
But when they've been so defensive and so unable to score and create excitement,
right,
that's really what's causing this. The fan base to just be like, okay, I'm paying all this money, tickets aren't cheap.
yeah,
You're going downtown, you're doing all the stuff you have to do to go game, and you're not getting rewarded with at least entertaining stuff to watch.
right.
So
Yeah. Should be an interesting couple of games here for City coming up. As we'll wrap things up here tonight. Chris, I appreciate you jumping on. Each
anytime,
time,
man,
you're able to. You always bring a lot of insight and thoughts to your own thoughts to things going on with City. But it's just it'll be interesting to see where this team heads after this stretch of a lot of games in a little bit of time.
For sure. Yeah. It's like I said, this is, I don't want to call it make or break, but
yeah,
it's getting pretty close to that time. Whoever your next guest is, I think, if you have them on after that 3-game stretch, we should be able to kind of break down and give everybody their perspective of where do we go from here, whether it's going to be, oh yeah, where do we go? Like, who do we play next? Let's go, or, oh God, who do we play next? Like it'll be real fascinating to watch. So I'll definitely be watching. So
looking at the schedule too, it's not, you say you do beat San Diego, you do beat Sporting, and you have Minnesota, who's pretty solid up there, top of the table, and then you have Colorado, who's not that far ahead of you. San Jose, who's not that far ahead of you too. So you got some promising things down the line if you can get some momentum behind you and get things rolling in the right way.
Correct. Yep, for sure.
So, if you tuned in with us tonight, appreciate it. Thanks for watching. You can always catch the replay anytime over on our YouTube channel and on Spotify and Apple Podcasts the next day, or as soon as I get it out. It varies on the audio side of things, but you can always catch the full video version here on our YouTube page. So make sure you like, subscribe, share out. We appreciate it. Chris, thanks again.
No problem, buddy.
For jumping on, and we will see you for the next episode of the City SC Show.